안녕하세요. 늦진스. I hope we don't get in trouble with Apple for this. The ETA. This is the new. There's one other one. There's like the track called New Jeans itself. I still gotta check that one out. I might as well after this. This is ETA. You know, I saw a performance. I believe it was the Inkigayo one, probably like the most recent one. That would make sense anyway. But it was for Super Shy, and it was it was really good. They sound just as good live as they do on the album cut. You know what I mean? Like it. I mean, it's good. It's really good. I was like, I mean, you know, of course I expected it to be good, right? But I mean, when you actually see it, and it's like, wow, they they actually do this, man. Like they do it so well. It's insanely good, especially for like their style is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but they managed to pull it off, and I mean, it was a very clean performance for sure. But this is ETA, and apparently it was shot on an iPhone 14 Pro, not an iPhone. I don't know what an iPhone is, but let's see.
Ava, look! I cannot believe this. Is that your boyfriend? 야, 빨리 좀 와. 어머, oh my god, look at them. 야, 네 남친 맞지? 맞다니까. 야, 쟤네 봐봐. Hey, we gotta go perform. Okay, I'll call you back.
낭비하지만 이 시간은 은행 서둘러서 정리해 얘는 위험해 받아주면 안돼 No you better trust me 답답해서 그래 저 안에도 없지만 없을 때겐 여기저기 눈빛을 불빛내 아주 눈부시게 Honestly 우리 사이에 He's been totally lying 내 생일 파티에 너만 보던 그날까지 네가 엄청 혼났던 그날 지원이가 일진이랑 헤어진 그날 그는 언제나 너가 없이 그날 나만 멋있는 옷을 입고 그날 Heard him say We can go wherever you like Baby say the words and man down All I need is you on my side We can go wherever you like I'll be you What's your ETA? 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 I'll be there right now There's a boy on her arm 아파만 미 너가 꽤못 잊을 때 내 말 믿어 You deserve better than that 내가 도와줄게 걔는 그냥 playing Boys be always lying Yeah 내 생일 파티에 너만 보던 그날까지 네가 엄청 혼났던 그날 지원이가 일진이랑 헤어진 그날 그는 언제나 너가 없이 그날 나만 멋있는 옷을 입고 그날 Heard him say We can go wherever you like Baby say the words and man down All I need is you on my side We can go wherever you like I'll wear you What's your ETA? 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 I'll be there right now There's a boy on her arm
this is it's a really interesting concept. There's like a, a story going on with this. Like the New Jeans songs that have sort of reacted to in the past. Well, let me see. Ditto, that had like kind of a story arc to it. It's a bit of a production. So in a similar way, there was like a character who was central to the concept of the video. A much younger character, right? Like it was a girl in school, kind of. But there was sort of a visual narrative that was represented around that particular character. The other songs, though, don't really seem to have that type of contextual layer to them. They seem more just songs in and of themselves, kind of. This is very different. It's the horn sample that is used, that kind of starts at the beginning of that's if I compare it to like Ditto, OMG, even Super Shy, that's a very rich sound. It's a clean cut sample. Like the way that sample is actually handled, it's a very well EQ'd sound and everything. Like the way it's been treated in the production, it's a very strong sound. I was kind of like, whoa, like, where's this gonna go? Once the 808 and the percussion and the drums came, or the bass came in rather, I was like, oh, okay, this now it feels more familiar, like like the tracks that I have heard, and like it's totally their style. It's totally their style, but the way that it is used to kind of explain this concept, or like provide the story for this type of lore, it's quite interesting. This is not like that character from the Ditto video. That was a much more like a younger type of character that wasn't at this like point in life yet, I guess, right? This is a little bit more mature of the entire concept and the sort of character that it kind of presents in the song too. But there were some interesting things in there. Essentially it's this song about there's this girl that they know, and her boyfriend is not being faithful, right? And so they're trying to like let her know. They're trying to communicate that to her, right? Obviously, but there were some interesting lines in there that seemed to kind of really break the fourth wall, right? Like they're saying like when Jiwon's, when she was in this situation, right? There, like it was the same, and like it's an interesting thing to do. Also, like, if it is right, this that's kind of like it's such a straightforward way of doing that. Like instead of kind of coming up with some sort of allegory or metaphor or something to represent like a situation, it's like, no, it's just explaining the situation. Like it's fairly objective, you know what I mean? And like, but within the structure of the song and the context of the song, it's really quite interesting. And then the way that it's like done with a phone is another actually another like avenue of that, because it's a tangibly sort of relatable type of thing, right? Like, how many people have those phones, you know? And for a long time now, there's been this workup that's kind of been heading in this direction, is that they keep engineering the phones to be able to do more and more stuff and higher resolution video and image, photo and everything, right? And sound also. But so it's an interesting concept for sure. It's it almost it almost kind of, it's a bit stronger than the song itself, or you know, the mix. The mix is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's definitely like a New Jeans track for sure. They didn't try to like reinvent the wheel or anything with what's going on in the mix. You know, it's really just this sort of concept that is being demonstrated here through this, and it's interesting, man. It's interesting. It's they got their signature style on it as far as the vocal delivery and everything. But man, it's like it's like two things that you want to try and wrap your head around. Like, one is like, what is going on with this story here, and then okay, well, like, it's a little bit distracting from the song itself, which is like that's actually the way I would describe even that's horn sound, that sample that starts off in the beginning is quite like unexpected, you know. And it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here, you know? And I guess that actually ties in really well with this idea that they're like, you know, if somebody came and told you, like, you know, you're just going about your day, you know, you're trying to, like, you know, do the things you got to do, you're coming home from work or whatever, but somebody's like, hey, like, this might be not the best time, but I really got to tell you something. You know what I mean? Like, it's an out of left field, like, unanticipated thing, and it's quite good, like, unnerving. You know, like, it's quite a destabilizing, like disrupting kind of a thing to hear, right? And it's interesting because it's really characteristic in that horn sound right at the beginning. Let's see. I was like, the ringer.
Ava, look. I cannot believe this. Is that your boyfriend?
Ava.
빨리 좀 와. Oh my god, look at them. 야, 네 남친 맞지? 맞다니까. 야, 쟤네 봐봐. Hey, we gotta get the phone. Okay, I'll call you back.
많이 시간은 은행 서툴러서 정리해 얘는 위험해 받아주면 안 돼 No you better trust me 답답해서 그래.
So, like, first the horn sound comes in, and it's a really rich sound, man, and the sort of the way the sample is done, you know, it eventually gets down to that like 16th note subdivision, right? Depending on how you count it, like, you know, the if you're going with that sort of larger, like, spread out type of a 4 count or whatever, you can hear like that snare hit, right, whenever it comes around, and count like your 2 and 4 there. The vocal delivery comes in, and it's, you know, like, it sounds New Jeans, right? Like, it's like, okay, that's signature New Jeans sound. Then you have this synth keyboard that because very soft, right? It's a very soft keyboard that's coming in and filling in this rhythm section. I believe it was like 5 chords, you know. You get dun 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 and then dun dun. They're sort of doing like maybe a 2-5-1 right at the end there. So halfway through the measure, they have on 1, the first chord comes in, and then by the time you get to 3, you actually shuffle to the next chord before you go back to the beginning of the chord progression there. Let's see. 808 comes in. See, that horn sound has dropped out now, and there's so much more space in the mix, right? Like just with that being gone. And I noticed that the vocal lines, at the beginning of the song, while that horn sound is going off, they tend to stay pretty clean and like maybe to the eighth notes, right? Like because that horn sound is so incredibly busy, and then there's some percussion that's going on, but you really have to give that horn sample like a lot of space to do what it's doing. Now that it's gone, we see a little change up in the rhythm and even the overall like line structure of the vocal lines that are going, because they got so much more space now. And what a resolution, right? Like once that horn sound is kind of out of the mix, now you can hear so much more of the low end, that bass sound, right? That 808 and everything. So now that can, like, the top of that can come up and resonate a little bit more and kind of brush up against the vocal parts that are in the mix.
Heard him say we can go wherever you like. Baby, say the words and man down. All I need is you on my side. We can go wherever you like. I'll be you.
I thought it was funny that, I'm trying to be inconspicuous over here while I'm doing my K-pop choreography. And I mean, I get it, but it's kind of funny, right? Like they're trying to, we're gonna, don't worry, we'll he won't see us or whatever. It's kind of funny, but the hooks is, it's really nice. It's like even now the horn sample comes back in, but it's a little bit toned down. Like it's not as bright, it's not as kind of almost shrill, right? It kind of really jives a lot better with the vocal hook for the chorus section. I haven't noticed like a change in the chord progression though. I think it's pretty much the same thing all the way through. It's actually a very tense chord progression. The specific sounds, like the synth sound and then the bass that's moving along, they're very round and they're very like almost cool. Like the individual timbres of these sounds are relatively cool, but the chord progression itself has a great amount of tension in it, right? With a very like measured resolve that comes around once it finally gets through it, the actual chord progression start over again. But it's like there's actually a lot of tension that's going on underneath that. It's very fitting for the song.
What's your ETA? 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 I'll be there right now. There's a boy on her arm. 아파만이 너가 못 잊을 때 내 말 믿어. You deserve better than that. 내가 도와줄게. 걔는 그냥 playing. Boys be always flying.
1 and 2 and 3 and like a lot of eighth notes, right? Before that, there's a little bit of 16th notes in there too. Like the vocals, as they do, right? Like they it's like it's a little bit more straightforward even than some of the other songs so far. It's as if it is driven by something, right? Like there's something that's a little bit more the point, in other words, and it's what they're trying to say. This actually has like a very tense kind of thriller type of, not thriller like the song, but like the genre, right? Like it's dramatic, right? Like it has this sort of subtext to it that it's all just very, very tense. It's interesting though. It's interesting. Like right there, because it goes up. The chord progression goes up. It goes right. It shifts up, and then you can feel when the change comes, but it actually stays on the same chord. That right there helps to build up like so much tension, right? And then once it finally gets through this, again, it's like whole note durations that's being sustained for. So the entire measure, right? And then finally, like when it drops again, but this is building up so much tension. Right there, the drop on that second, it's really nice. That's also replaced. So in the beginning there are more chords, like as it works its way through, but by this point in the song, because it's staying on that same, at least that same root, right? It really sounds to me like it's the same chord for 2 whole measures, but that now has taken up all of that space, and so we've gone from like it felt 4, maybe 5 chords, right? But now we're down to like 3. That's a really interesting sort of, it's like, overall structure for how this chord progression actually goes. Okay, so change now. Yeah, it changed right there. Like it didn't hang out on that same second chord for and a whole nother measure. It actually shifted. I think it went to 2 different chords actually, because it didn't feel like the same drop, like what occurs before that when it finally resolves and you get that drop. It kind of walked it down, but I don't even think as far. It's really, really, man. It's rather intense. Like it is really. It's very appropriate for the song. This is interesting too. I've seen a lot, when it gets to that point in the song, and basically they'll go back into like a loop of the mix, right? While the credits roll, but it actually lets the phone sound keep ringing. Who's calling? It's probably him, right? I mean, that's who it is, right? Like that's now he's like, oh no, I gotta call. It's a really interesting concept. It's rather dark, if I'm being honest. It's rather mature, and it kind of goes to a dark place. It's cool. It's a New Jeans type of song, like it's got their style, it's got all their signature sort of elements and everything in it, so it's great, but it's so different, right? Like it's such a different vibe, from the conceptual level and all the way through it. There's a great amount of tension in the chord progression, for sure, in a lot of things, that very cutting horn sample that's being used, especially in the beginning. It comes on so strong. I think it's a really good sort of musical demonstration of what the concept actually is, and that's not uncommon when it comes to New Jeans. Like their music is incredibly clever and sophisticated. Even the stuff that seems a little bit more lighthearted, like Super Shy, or OMG, or like these songs are on one, because on one level it's like, it's very enjoyable, it's fun, right? But when you get down to it, to the actually the way that these songs are written, and the sort of composition, the song structures and everything, it's not an easy style. It's actually quite difficult and quite sophisticated, to do this type of music. And this is a very interesting use for it. It's what they do, but to use it to pull off this type of concept, and this type, because they've done it before. There's a lot of, I have referred to some of their music before as having these very deep sort of psychedelic elements to it, and it's all auditory. It's there's some visual for sure, but a lot of it is what is happening in the sound. And this is using that same type of approach, but to create a very deep sense of tension, and just, the certain sounds are very cutting, and certain sounds are very driving, and it all sort of wrenches, it's cool, it's enjoyable, right? It's an enjoyable song, but it's an incredible amount of tension that gets built up. It's because it kind of lays down a certain pattern in the beginning of the song, but once the chord progression kind of changes, which I believe happens probably around the first hook or the first chorus, as soon as it starts to sustain that chord for those two whole measures, what's actually happening there is a tremendous deal of tension. And the next, the drop that occurs after that is so sudden, it's so immediate, right? It's inevitable, it's rather cold feeling as well. Right at the very end, the last time that it comes back around and doesn't hold that chord for those two measures, and actually gives you something of a more comprehensive resolution as far as the way the chords progress at the end. It's a more comprehensive resolution, but it's also kind of weaker. It's not as strong, it's not as intense as those earlier ones. It kind of leave you in a weird place, you know what I mean? It feels unresolved, right? And it matches the concept so well. It's so theatrical almost, right? Because she's, even at the end, she's driven to this cliff, and the phone's ringing off the hook. There's no answer though. There's no, she gets out of the car, and what, it leaves you on a cliffhanger, and the music doesn't give you a strong resolve at the end. Doesn't give you a strong resolution, so it feels unfinished. It feels like there's something more to it. It's incredible. It's really, really quite clever, man. It's really, really quite clever. Their music has that though. Characteristically, it's very intelligent. It's very clever stuff. This is it's an interesting use of their style and their composition and everything to create this kind of song. It's cool, but it does have me wondering what happens next like whatever. Let's say this song leads into something, like this. Let's say there's supposed to be a follow up to this, and maybe I should check the album too, um, because they could continue on with like the next song, and actually provide that sense of resolve, right? Depending on what it is, like how it's handled. Is it supposed to present more? Is it really intended to continue the sort of narrative that's being developed here, right, and established with this song? Because you could do it, and it'd be quite enjoyable, man. Like the payoff would be huge, right? Like if you got to that next track or the follow-up track or however you want to, the next sort of sequential song, to reach that kind of resolve would be great. But I feel like there should almost be like a trilogy, because this is just the beginning. There's no, this is chapter 1 or act 1, right? You need to have act 2, which should actually be quite chaotic, and then finally you should get to act 3, which will bring on the sort of resolution there. But I don't know. We'll have to see. It was really good though, man. This is really interesting to see them do this type of concept. It was cool, but lots of tension, kind of dark, and I'm left wanting to know what happens. You know what I mean? Like what happens next. But New Jeans, ETA, the plot thickens. It's got interesting, man. It got interesting real fast.